Hello and welcome back to the Black Dad Brand. My name is Jamil Pugh, and I'm here with Dr. David Inniss, who is the author of this book, Being the Dad That I Never Had. And so we had a really great conversation the first time around. And wanted to kind of follow up because there's so much packed into this book about becoming a father. For those who who've had fathers, may have not learned some of these different lessons, and even for those who haven't had a father. And so we're going to really dive deep into this. And so again, remember, Black Dad Brand is about uplifting Black fathers so that their families can thrive. And today we're going to focus on parenting style. And so David's going to share with us some amazing information related to his book. Go ahead and check it out. It's on Amazon. But David or Dr. Inners, I wanted to kind of jump straight into a question that something that really stood out to me in your book. You discussed in the chapter "Preparing for Legacy." You define what legacy is and what legacy is not. Um, I'll take a look at what you wrote in terms of what you said legacy is and what you said it's not. But I'd like for you to like comment on that because I think it's important. Like the moment you have a child, it is a part of your legacy. It is a part of how you live on forever. And so, in the book, you said that a legacy is transmitted by an ancestor or a predecessor. It is determined by doing, and it is the life that we actually lead and what we would like to hear in your eulogy. Um, Contrasting that by what you said about what a legacy is not, it's not a track record, it's not wishful thinking, it's not the life that we imagine or dream about. It's not a coincidence. It happens now and then. So just contrasting that legacy discussion, what led to that, and just give us some insight as to why you include that in the book.
I think that I included that because I wanted to communicate permanence and shifts, right? Because from my studies, I understood, and from my personal experience, I understood that the idea of fatherlessness was not just something that happened in happenstance. It in itself is a legacy, right?
Mm,
Which is it's a negative legacy. But what was interesting to me is that it was so well planted in generations, right, of fathers.
right.
So if we can plant something so negative that has nothing to do with possessions, nothing to do with valuables, nothing to do with money, and it is so impactful to not just an individual, but a community and a whole, sometimes whole countries,
Mm,
can we not plant the opposite and plant something that really is positive and uplifting? And so, as opposed to this having this idea of a negative legacy, we wanted to have a shift and permanence in having positive legacies. And so that's where the contrast lies because fatherlessness, as negative as it is not a track record. It's something that is through your bloodline, right? It's something that
mm.
you can start in your bloodline and it lasts and it's pervasive, right? So I wanted to make sure that in defining legacy that we moved away from traditional explanations of heirlooms and of things,
Mm.
and make sure that fathers knew that they had an opportunity to create something that lasted beyond generations and that would really impact the positive contributions that their children and grandchildren and great grandchildren can make to the world.
It's I want to follow up on that too because a lot of times you hear people as they get up in their later years, they talk about wanting to leave something for the generations behind, whether it's their children or their grandchildren. And typically, it does in their mind sometimes comes in the forms of assets, whether that's money, a house, or some of those things. But as you talk about in the book, it's some of the things you leave within the children that you have. And so you mentioned that fatherhood is an intentional, logical, and methodical about creating the experiences that you wish to pass on to your children and generations beyond. Tell me, about that, that statement in itself, like it's intentional, methodical, like wanting to have experiences versus actual things.
For me, I mentioned earlier that, the quote, fathers will father in the way they were fathered. And when I said that and I paused, people would often say, well, what about the folks that were not fathered? So how will they father, right? Fathers will
Mm.
father the way they were fathered. The second part of that is unless they make intentional efforts to shift generational trends in their bloodline, right? When I say intentional, I mean that is very much like the definition of what a legacy is not. It's not happenstance that you're going to address these issues, right? Fatherhood in itself is difficult. It is hard. It is a grind. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? So it takes intentionality. It takes commitment. It takes an energy that is long lasting for you to go through the process of making these changes and being that support system and being everything that a child deserves in having a father, that they deserve in having a teacher that teaches them the ropes about manhood and transitioning from boyhood to manhood, that they deserve the lessons around what does non-sexualized love look like for a young girl, right? Fathers
Mhm.
need to be there to demonstrate that. And so that takes intentionality, because the easy thing to do when it's hard, regardless of whether it's fatherhood, commitment, um, career, the easy thing to do is to quit. The easiest thing to do is to walk away. Um,
Right.
you'll pay the price later, but
Right.
in the moment, it feels like the easy thing to do. You can think of anything hard, whether it's a race, whether it's a career move, or being in a career that you're not enjoying, and if you've ever quit anything, the moment you quit, it feels like a breather. The next moment, it feels like trash, right? To say differently. So that intentionality and the motivation to make a difference is rooted in that idea that we have to stay the course and do it for the sake of our children.
You in the book you also talked about like um you know for your children but also generations beyond. In a sense, as a man has a kid, you should be also thinking about your grandkids, and so like I wanted to kind of tap into that, because that's that sometimes that's like really far into the future,
Yeah,
right? You're thinking about like, I'm raising my kids so that my grandkids have these experiences or these types of values instilled in them. And so um tell us a bit about like the process of including that in your book and saying like, this is a long haul experience being a father.
yeah. So one of the things is that, as particularly this relates to the Black experience, we want to see ourselves represented in the highest echelons of society. We want to see ourselves represented in the highest levels of careers. We want to see ourselves represented in the highest levels of moral well-being, right? That's one factor to consider. The other factor is, typically in our lives, we're fortunate if we see three generations, right? If we get to see and interact with our great grandparents, that's a luxury. That is not guaranteed, and not many people get that. But a lot of people get to see their grandparents, right? And so for men who have experienced fatherlessness and it is pervasive in their family tree, they look back
Mm.
2 generations, and for me, I look back 2 generations and I see absent fatherhood. Okay. So when I say I parent for my grandchildren, what I'm saying is that my grandchildren, if I do a great job with my sons, and I show my sons and model positive male citizenship for my sons, and I show them what it means to be present and resilient and stay in the pocket, if you will, they will do the same, because fathers will father in the way they were fathered. I'm tying these all things together. And so therefore, if my grandkids can see
Mm.
2 generations back, they will see 2 generations of present, powerful, resilient men, which for me is a mind shifter in terms of how they approach their own experiences with fatherhood, right? So you
Wow.
combine those two things, the fact that we want to see ourselves represented in the highest echelons of society and as moral influencers and people with moral influence, and combine that with the fact that we want to see 2 generations of present men in our family tree, so that it becomes cemented as a legacy that that's what we do. Then all these things come together for good.
Wow. I mean, I mean, that is amazing. Sometimes, you think about, like, for me, going back, and I had my grandfather, but didn't have my father, in a sense of, like, seeing him and knowing that I'm kind of reaching back to some of the things that he did, and how present he was, and the way that he was with us as grandchildren, and trying to pull that down to my children.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much more I want to cover in the book. There's a graphic in your book on page 57, and it's called growth, right? And there's 3 main parts to it: restoration, resilience, and exploration. And wrapped around each of those layers is the word circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Tell us about this illustration and what you were trying to communicate to the audience in depicting this growth illustration.
Yeah. So it is suggesting it is an adaptation and a confluence of multiple models that I had looked at, one of which was the model of resiliency. And the model of resiliency suggested that, when we develop resilient qualities as we are experienced or gain exposure to more episodes of adversity, right? And so we have multiple ways to respond. We can respond by just going back to our status quo. We can respond negatively, or we can respond in an upward spiral of gaining knowledge and gaining um, more resilient qualities as we go
Yeah.
through experiences. So the second time that we experience a type of adversity, it is less impactful to our lives because we would have developed resilient qualities based on the first experience, right? So that's the foundational adaptation. That's where it's coming from. This idea of exploration, resiliency, and restoration suggests that there's an element of humility that every father or fatherless father should have in approaching fatherhood, saying that I don't have all the answers, right? I don't have all the answers. So exploration is about, what do I need to do to get all the answers? Who do I have to make as mentors? What books do I read? What experiences do I seek? Whose advice do I go after to explore and find solutions to the challenges that I face, right? Um, I personally, I had mentors that I saw as good fathers. I had peers that I saw as good fathers, and I also read a lot, and and therapy was also important to understand. And so it's a personal exploration, but it's also exploration and gaining knowledge into the role of fathers, and what do we do, and how much can we damage, and how much we can um, embellish the lives of our children. I think that the knowledge of one of the things I touched on in the book is that is there's always that critical wound that a father can cause that is life lasting. And if we are knowledgeable of that, our decision making, and we keep that in our peripheral vision, our decision making is impacted by the fact that we don't want to cause that wound that is going to last my son, my daughter, all the way through their lives. Right? That thing that they can go back to on a dime's notice when they're 50 years old and say, that was so painful. I know what mine is, right? So it's that exploration idea of going after the knowledge. The second thing here, resiliency, is that life happens, right? Life happens. Adversity is going to come your way. It is inevitable that adversity is going to come your way and cause you to have to make decisions. And by adversity in human nature, adversity refers to anything that disrupts the status quo. Because humans are very much homeostasis people, right? That we want to stay in the same vein and keep everything steady. And anything that disrupts our status quo, we consider adversity, and we have to adapt to it. Resiliency is necessary for that. Do we respond by just going back to our status quo? Do we respond by just saying, gonna have some loss, so I just take the losses and roll with it, right? Or do I respond by getting stronger, building resilient qualities, and getting better? That's that's insight into how do you defy the limitations that are in the way to prevent you from being able to be the father that you can be. And then restoration is when you've had those pieces of adversity, some of which may be long lasting. How do you restore? What is the source you go to restore, to rebuild, to retool, and then go back into exploration again? So we're always into this mode of explore, deal with circumstances, restore. Man, I'm taking myself to another level. Let me explore some more, right? That's career growth. That's fatherhood. That is life to me. And so it's a good model to pull into fatherhood to say, particularly when you don't have a model of how it's supposed to be done, right? Particularly when you don't have a model of how it's supposed to be done, that exploration, that resiliency, and that ability to restore is actually very important.
I thought that illustration was great, but your explanation was even better. I think the way I looked at it, I was more of a top
Mm,
down, thinking that we need to restore, from the previous traumas or issues of not having a father
mhm,
around, understand that resiliency and then go on to exploration. But you're saying exploration is the first step and then you move your
yes.
way up. And then you follow your way back down in the sense of like once you've restored yourself, you go back into the exploration part of it.
Mhm,
So I really like how that works. Now, there's that ribbon around it that says
mhm.
circumstances. What's that about?
Circumstances refer to when life is happening, right?
Oh, okay. Oh, so each level has
Yeah. So, for
circumstances.
example, I'll give you an example. When I went into fatherhood, I committed to giving my sons a two-parent home, right? And there's a video that I always show at the end of a lot of the talks that I do. And one thing that I zone in on is a picture of me holding my two boys, and I zone in on the fact that I was wearing a wedding ring, right?
Mm.
And for me, that circumstance was the circumstance under which fatherhood would thrive, right? Two-parent home, family is stable, great family situation. For for things beyond my understanding, you know, my marriage did not make it, right? I'm a divorced guy. And for me, that's a circumstance shift that could really break the trend that you were on as a father, right? You could allow that to really destroy the journey that you're on. Or you could commit to co parenting like no other, right? And
Mm-hmm.
remains one of the things that I always tell people I have the best ex-wife a man can have, but 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 the thing that we committed to is that there is nothing that we in life, nothing or anyone that we can hate more than the love that we hold for our children. So therefore, the love for our children will guide every decision that we make, right? So that's the circumstance.
Yeah.
Circumstances shifting, and you being able to adapt to them.
As you talk about your relationship with your ex-wife and having, the ability to have a great co-parenting experience, I think that's it seems like it correlates with the very first rule in your contract to yourself for your children. And we'll explore that
Mhm.
more lately, but I mean, later in the podcast. But I just want to quickly diverse to the topic of co parenting. If you could just give some advice, because there's quite a few brothers out there who are in the situation of co parenting, making sure that they establish a copacetic relationship with their partner and the children. What advice do you have for fathers in that position, trying to make the relationship work with the children's mother, so that they can be the best father that they
Yeah,
can be?
outside of all the things around being respectful and so on, I think the fundamental thing is that one thing I just mentioned. What drives your behavior? Is it the bitterness or hatred or dislike or disregard for someone else? Or is it the love of your children? If you're a committed father and you're committed to making a difference and leaving a legacy and you're doing all these things that we talked about before, you're committed to not wounding your children in a way that is life lasting. You're committed to teaching them about life and and teaching them about responding when there's adversity, then the love of your children needs to be the guiding thing. And if the love of your
Mm.
children is the guiding thing, then all other things fall in place. You will never be disrespectful to your children's mother if the love of your children is the guiding thing. You will never abandon them and not show up for them on time and go support their sports and go watch their theater performances and go to their dance recitals and so on if the love of your children is guiding it. You will never abandon them financially if the love of your children is the foremost decision driver for you. So my thing is to really unpack the fact and live with the fact that, look, this relationship between adults did not work out, but the love of my children is everything. It's everything. And therefore, that's what's going to drive my decisions.
So I changed my mind. I do want to go ahead and mention that first element of the contract. It says, "I will love, honor, and respect your mother." And I think that guiding principle, and it's number one on your list of 21 items in terms of a contract to yourself for your children. And so I think that speaks volumes that before you go into all the other items of what you're going to be as a father and do for your kids and the commitment and all those other elements, number one was, I will love, honor, and respect your mother.
And I did not say love, honor, and respect my wife. I said I will love, honor, and respect your mother under
Wow.
any circumstances.
Wow.
Right? So I make sure that my boys see it modeled to them how their mother is treated by me with ultimate respect, regard. Mother's Day is a big thing um, for her,
Yeah.
because that's what it's supposed to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Circling back to some of the other elements of this book, what I love about it, and I know it goes into some of your background in education, but this book comes with homework,
Mm.
and it's excellent. My mentors have always told me that it's not about the knowledge you obtain always, but it's about how you apply the knowledge that you've obtained. And so there's a legacy assignment, right, where you ask 6 questions to kind of help you think deeply about the legacy that you want to leave within your children. Can you tell us about that assignment and how you envision that working for the audience when someone reads that assignment? Like, what are you hoping for them to experience?
Yes. Great. So the legacy assignment, it starts off, there's six mini assignments in there. And the first one says, think about the legacy that you wish to leave, right? In the definition of legacy, we said it's not happenstance, it's intentional.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the intentionality comes from thinking and knowing what the destination is. You're going to embark on a journey of creating a legacy, but what is the destination? What is it in your children that you want to have, that you want them to have? I wanted my sons to be well-rounded. I wanted them to be able to speak with the CEOs and presidents of nations, but also be very sensitive to the needs of every person that's experiencing homelessness or someone that needs their help. I wanted them to have that level of sensitivity to flow up and down any kind of societal ladder. I wanted my boys to be athletic. I wanted them to value sports and competition, but I wanted them to understand what it means to have sportsmanship, right? I wanted my boys to understand the value of wealth and money and what it means to lifestyle, but I also wanted them to understand what it means to lifestyle, right?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So there, there,
Yeah.
there are several. So there's several things that I charted, and I knew what I wanted to teach them and what legacy I wanted them to have. I wanted them to be expressive and be able to display and express love in ways that were never said to me, that I wanted them to have open to them all the time without judgment. So I wrote it down in a journal, and the second step is record it, right? So I wrote that down in a journal. I have audio recordings of me talking about these things. I have conversations with my children about it, and share it with others that you trust, right? I tend to I've shared this in the um, in the form of a contract as many people that would read it, right? Right? And
Right.
so people that I trust have circled back to ask me about it. I've shared this with my mother. I've shared this with my son's mother. I've shared it with my sons, and I've shared it with close colleagues who will question it, who will ask about it, and challenge me to live by it. Right? Because that's the thing you want. You want accountability. When you share it with others, you're asking others to hold you accountable.
Real quick, let me ask: do your sons are they aware? I'm sure they're aware of the contract, but do they ever call you out on it? Like, Dad, you said here on bullet number 21 that you're gonna do X, Y, Z.
So my sons, when this was developed, my sons obviously couldn't read. When my
Right.
oldest son was 7, I took him to there was a men's counseling center that I was very good friends with the owner, and I would often do some presentations there. And she had a huge poster of the contract on the wall. There were several men that wrote contracts based on that, which was a blessing to me. So the huge poster on the wall, and it had in the background, it had a picture of a hand holding a baby, but the hand had the West Point ring on. So my son recognized that that's my dad's hand. So he went to the board when he was 7 and he could read now. He started to read it. He said, "Oh, what's this, Dad?" I said, "It's a contract that I wrote to you." He said, "Okay." And he starts to read and he says, "Okay, you do that. Okay, you do that. Okay, Dad, you need to work on this one." And he kept going, and you need to work on this one too. And that for me was really excellent because the purpose of the contract is accountability. And who best to
Wow.
tell you that you're living by it than the children that you are actually trying to be that dad for. So we've had revisits of the contract in my house, and I'm improving. Yes.
Yo,
Yeah. So,
that's beautiful, man. I mean, you're really inspiring me. I think, like I said, this book is been convicting in the sense that it's really touching my soul and saying, here's ways that you can get better as a father, right? And I'm intentional, methodical, planning, and but what this book has done for me is kind of help me to see some of my blind spots,
mhm.
right? I'm in the mindset of a provider father, right? I'm gonna go out here and I'm gonna get everything to make sure the family's safe, comfortable, relaxed, and they got everything. But um, and I, the social emotional stuff, I'm there for that too. But there's so much more to being present and being a father. And I have a daughter and a son, and so that's going to be different. And I think about what type of man do I want my young son to be. He's 10 months old right now, and I think as I'm listening to your story, reading this book, it's really spurring ideas more so than me picking up and finding new things. I'm like, wow, that would be good to implement. This would be good that we implement. And so I'm gonna write my contract, share it with you, and get your feedback first.
Excellent.
And then my kids are old enough to read. I can't wait to see how they hold me accountable. But
Yes.
I think this is great. But I want to let you go ahead and go back
Mhm.
to um, the assignment that we were talking about before we go into the contract.
Right. So we talked about sharing it with others, and when you share it with others, you want to describe what is it that you really want. No, very simple language, um, easy for anyone to understand, so that you can really get their feedback and get what others think. Review this on a regular basis. Review this legacy. Do a self audit and be very upfront with yourself about how you're performing against the legacy that you want to create. Right? Are you wanting your sons to be able to handle um, sportsmanship in a really good manner, but you're the coach on the sideline that's going nuts, right? With the other with the refs and the other coaches, or are you modeling something that you want to see? And then finally, be open to revising it, right? Revising that legacy, as because why? Because circumstances change. And just like that ribbon wraps around the explore, resiliency and restoration, circumstances can definitely dictate the kind of legacy that you leave and shape.
So there's a moment that I thought was really beautiful in your book. You talk about when your first son was born,
Mhm.
and he went into the NICU, and you talk about being there with him and kind of uttering some words to him, almost as if a promise to him, like, this is what I'm going to do. And I think that was the beginning of the contract.
Hmm.
Could you read, would you like me to read them to you, or would you want to read those words of what you said to your son and then kind of comment on it? It's on page 66.
You go ahead and you read it.
Okay. It says, I will never fail you. I will promise to never leave you. I will teach you anything you need to know. I will make sure that you know how much you are loved.
Yes.
That, for any father who's been, there in the delivery room and your child's in your hands and you're that first moment of being introduced to them, uh, a million things are going through your mind of what you want to be for that individual, right?
Hmm.
And for you to utter these words, what was going through your mind to focus on those three statements, those four statements?
There were several things that were going through my mind. First of all, there's no return policy here, right? There's no return policy. They,
Like, nah, you can't go
they
back.
can't go back. They're
Right.
here. And it was important for me at the moment to, I had placed a lot of thought into fatherhood. Um, and I placed a lot of thought in the kind of man I wanted to be. And when I thought about it, abandonment was not an option. Walking away from a situation was not an option, right? And I wanted to make sure when I was saying those things, is assuring me that this was going to be a challenging journey, but that was not an option. Leaving or not having an emotional and physical closeness with my children was not an option. When I say I will never fail you, it didn't say I would never fail. It said it would never fail you, right? Because there's a differentiation. It is important to me that my sons see me in my failure, right? Because they need to see the restoration and they need to see the resilience at play, right? And they recognize that because they've seen me at some low points, but they see how I carry myself in low points, and they see how I carry myself in high points. I will teach you anything you need to know. For me, this was important because I thought back to the times when I had to learn by trial and error, or there was not a presence there to say, this is how you do this.
Right.
Intentional teaching, not that you just happen to watch and see, but there's intentional time spent teaching. That was important to me as well. And as I looked at how helpless a newborn is in the NICU, having just been rushed there to make sure that you're going to be okay, and looking through the glass and seeing how helpless they are, how much they depended on us for everything, I certainly believe that I needed to be able to teach them anything that he wanted to know. And the last one, which for me stands out as I reread it right now, I will make sure that you know how much you are loved. Like I mentioned, the first time I love you was used in a sentence between me and my father was me to him when I was 40 years old,
Wow.
right? My sons will never, ever have to go through that. They need to know on a daily basis that they
Mm-hmm.
can do nothing. They can do nothing that can take away the love I have for them. And if they operate with that confidence, right, that they can do nothing that will take away the love for them, that is something that is it creates trust and transparency in a relationship. They know they can come and tell me, hey, I screwed up in this way. And they know there's going to be a conversation around actions, consequences, and so on. It is never going to be a feeling of, I don't love you anymore. That love is there to stay. And being able, it drives me, it gives me energy in my house when my boys will randomly say, hey, Dad, I love you. Or when we part in the mornings, it's always, I love you. Or even better, when one brother says to the other, hey, bro, I love you. That for me is so fulfilling. And so that was the basis of, yes, it was the basis for sitting and thinking, you know what? I probably should write a contract to my son so that they know how much I thought of them during this time. But I'd say that my experience with my first son was dramatically different from my experience with my second son, and they're only 20 months apart. When I had my second son, I was an emotional wreck. Like I had to walk laps around the hospital to kind of gather myself just before he was born because I was I struggled with understanding how I had enough love for a second person, right? Because I had poured so much into my first son. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to do this.
No way.
There's no way. So I was a ball of
Right.
tears. And then obviously when there's something that clicks in, once that Nico was here. So yeah, fundamental, and this is where the idea of the contract started.
Yeah, man. Like I said, this book comes with a increased level of accountability as you continue to read. And when you pick this up, folks, be ready to commit to this parenting thing. It's a lifestyle, and so I want to kind of end on the actual contract. What you wrote to yourself for your children and their mother, as we start with that. If you wouldn't mind just going through all 21 items so that our audience can hear from you the contract to being a father.
Okay. It says, in accordance with my personal values and my commitment to true fatherhood, I do hereby enter into this contract with Jalen and Nico on this 24th day of March in the year 2007 and this 29th day of November in the year 2008. Number one, I will love, honor, and respect your mother. I will love you unconditionally at all times. I will nurture and protect you from danger to the best of my abilities. I will provide for you, ensuring that you are always appropriately clothed, well fed, and have a roof over your head. I will teach you how to ride a bicycle, throw a ball, and fly a kite. I will read to you. I will make sure that you attend schools that give you the greatest opportunity to excel. I will partner with your teachers to help you as much as I possibly can with school. I will be candid with you about my mistakes in life so that you can avoid the pitfalls that I fell into. I will reveal to you in a non-boastful manner the characteristics that I have that help me overcome many challenges and achieve a level of success. I will help you to define success in terms that are suited to you. I will assist you in any way possible to help you achieve that success described above. I will be a tough disciplinarian at times, but this is out of love and based upon my desire to fulfill everything else in this contract. I will never strike you. I will play with you. I will laugh with you. I will empathize when you cry during tough times, support you, and show you that you can recover from any knockdown. I will be strong enough to provide guidance, but mild enough to encourage you. I will be firm enough to instill discipline, but flexible enough to show the value of tolerance. I will be attentive enough to recognize moments when I can potentially wound you, and courageous enough to do what it takes to avoid them. I will be fearless enough to be wild in a godly way and transfer that wildness to you, my little boy. Signed, David.
Wow. Folks, go get this. This is powerful. There's so much in here. I really got to thank my mom again for buying me this book. It's been such a joy, man. It's been a pleasure talking with you, getting to know your story, getting to understand the the message and the mission behind the words in this book has been absolutely incredible. So thank you again for joining us. Everyone else, make sure to follow us on social media at Black Dad Brand. Check out our website. There's so much content there. And so until the next time, stay tuned and subscribe.